My name's Matt and I'm joined by Dan. How's it going, Dan?
Well, better than some people.
Don't know what you mean. Yeah, I think from the first 30 seconds of this podcast, it'd be pretty clear to anybody that I am suffering from a cold. And I've got to admit, I did, when I coughed, I was a bit nervous with all the stuff going on at the moment. And then I coughed twice and I quickly had to reach out for the thermometer and check what the symptoms are. But it doesn't seem like I have the big C at the moment. But, well, if there's no podcast next week, you know why, don't you, sir?
Well, if there is a podcast next week and it's just me talking, then...
Yeah, and my obituary, so...
And luckily we record this remotely, so I'm not anywhere near you, which, unless the big C has learned how to traverse the interweb and pass from microphone to microphone, I should be all right.
Yeah, you should be okay. I think, like I said, yeah, it shouldn't be that. It shouldn't be an issue. But I know if we were doing it face to face, the anxiety would be going through the roof. It's weird. You walk down the street now and you get a little bit of a tickle in the back of your throat and you cough, and instantly everyone within like 5 miles of around you sees you and instantly thinks, "Is that guy got COVID? Is that guy going to infect us all?"
Yeah, well,
It definitely changed it.
try going through the COVID pandemic with it being a hay fever sufferer.
Oh man, that is not good. That is not good. Well, sneezing isn't a symptom apparently, but of course people don't think
Tell
that when
that
they see
to the
someone
masses.
sneezing. Yeah, exactly. They just think you'd be infected. So, but oh yeah. So forgive the I'm the deeper voice than usual. I'll be back to my usual high pitched whiny self in no time.
Yeah, and in the meantime, we'll record as much as we can while you're still with us.
Yeah, exactly. So, well, like I said, this is the Grapplehook Podcast. We record every week on a Wednesday, and the podcast goes live on the following Friday. We talk about gaming news, gaming topics, nerd culture, anything that me and Dan really want to talk about that we think you might find interesting. And we'd love to get you involved in the podcast as well. So if you've got any questions, any thoughts or ideas, we'd love to hear from you. You can reach out to me or Dan at Twitter. You can reach out to Dan at TatchND, that's TATCHND. Or you can reach to me at Twitter, which is at Metroidvania.
Indeed.
So Dan, what have you been playing this week?
What have I been playing? I played Fall Guys today. I think I'm starting to get to the upper echelon of players. Got a couple wins today and a couple wins the other day as well. So,
Right. So you're seeing how it all plays together, how you got all your techniques and tricks for all the maps now.
Working it out. Yeah, I had a good 1v1 on a. It's like there's like a stage where it's what's the best way to, so it's like a circular platform that gradually falls apart, and it's one of the final stages, and you've got to jump over a beam that sort of goes around in a circle, like over the platform. You've got to like jump over it when it comes around and, avoid being knocked off. And gradually the platform falls away from beneath you until there's like just one piece left.
Yep.
And there was me and 2 other guys left on this sort of sole remaining piece. And one of them got knocked off fairly quickly, and then it was just me and the other guy. It went on for about 20 seconds, and then he kind of misjudged jumping over the beam, got over it, but misjudged it in that it still knocked him over. I managed to jump over it, and as the beam was coming around, for the next spin, before he could get to his feet, I grabbed him and then let go just before the beam hit the both of us. I jumped over it and the beam took him off with it. So that was pretty satisfying. But yeah, no, I'm enjoying it. It's good. I really do. What I've worked out is there's about 10 days left, or 12 days left before the end of the season. And I'm 10 ranks away from hitting the top of the sort of in-game battle pass. So I'm sort of aiming to do about a level a day. And it's going well, enjoying it.
Oh, good. I remember you said that you were going to be trying to do as much as you can to get that pass completed before the next season comes out. So.
Yeah, I'm going to do it because whenever you get a win, you get about sort of 400 XP, and it's about 800 XP for a level. And I'm sort of, like I say, I do a level a day, and then after that, I can't play Fall Guys all day. It's not one of those games, but I can play it for like an hour, maybe maybe 2. if I'm doing well. But um, I don't really play it to win, as strange as that sounds.
No, just
I,
have a
I
bit of fun.
well, no, I sort of play it to deny other people. If I can get to the crown stage, then it's all about winning. But until I get to the crown stage, it's about taking people out.
I was gonna say I remember seeing the one of Doctor Disrespect's streams when he was playing with PewDiePie,
Yeah.
and there was that level. I haven't played much Fall Guys. I've only played a bit of it, so I might butcher this. But there's that level where you have to go through the course and the slime's rising as it
Yeah,
goes
slime
through.
climb, yeah.
And there was this one guy at the top, and what he was doing is he was basically pushing people back into the
Yeah,
slime to
yeah,
keep them
yeah,
away.
yeah.
Um,
Classic.
and literally was pushing this one guy away into the slime. And as soon as the guy got taken out by the slime, he just ran through the portal through the end.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I'd say that's probably one of the earlier sort of trolls that I saw on the game. And as soon as I realized people doing that, every time I see someone waiting at the end of Slime Climb, I always, when just before you hit the bit where they can grab you, always jump and dive. Like never trust
Yeah,
anyone. Never trust
they're
anyone.
gonna be
Even
them
if
choice.
even if you're playing with friends, never trust anyone.
No, it's even worse with friends. I would have thought.
Well, it is, but you can also work together. Until you get
Right.
to the crown stage, like two people eliminating one person is easier than one person eliminating another. If you gang up on people, then you can sort of get away with a lot more. But in the final stage, I mean, when the crown's on the line, it's kind of every bean for themselves, as it were. Do I think is there anything else I've been playing? Oh, I started playing Spiritfarer
Oh, nice.
based
After
on
after
your
last week.
based on your recommendation. I've played about 4 hours.
Oh
I've
yeah.
just picked up my sort of uncle, I think he is,
Oh yeah.
and I'm sort of I think I'm just about getting to the point where I've kind of got through like the tutorial stage, and it's more now just about kind of exploring the world and finding spirits and fulfilling their wishes. Although I've not yet got to any of those sort of fulfillment quests. They've kind of hinted at it a few times, so.
Yeah. Yeah, the opening few hours of the game, it kind of like teaches you how the game mechanics work in a non-intrusive way. It's not like Far Cry 3, Blood Dragon, where it literally forces the tutorial in your face before you can progress. It gently nudges you in the right direction
Yeah,
all the way through until you can start being able to play it solo without that need. So,
yeah,
so
yeah.
you've got two passengers at the moment.
Yeah, well, I've got the one you start with, and I've just picked up the second one, who I think is my uncle, and I've kind of added that I've got a house, a field, and a kitchen on my boat, and I'm sort
Right.
of the last thing I remember getting is the upgraded fishing rod, because I was wondering, like, I was doing a lot of fishing at the beginning, and I was thinking, like, I'm either getting herons or boots, and it got to a point where it's like I'm only fishing out boots.
Yeah.
I'm thinking like this got to be broken, like. And then I got to a point where I think it's the second passenger I picked up when he said, "Oh, like I can upgrade your fishing rod. You've probably been pulling out a lot of trash," and it's like, okay, it all makes sense now. And
Yeah.
after that, sort of started getting the good stuff. But yeah, I like it. It's interesting. Um, um, I sort of I read a few reviews after your recommendation and just sort of got a general feeling for what the game was about, and how well it was received. And I watched a couple trailers and stuff, and it sort of
Yeah.
sold me. So yeah, I'll sort of keep going with it and see how I get on. But
Yeah, it's one of those games very much to dip in and out of, I think, in terms of, you could jump on and play for 2 hours, but, you could come back to it then after that and take a break. And because it's just such a chill game, it's like when, you're thinking, right, do I want to play something that's quite intense, or I know I'm going to have to invest quite a few hours
yeah,
into it, or I could just go on there, go to a few destinations, do a bit of fishing, listen to the chilled out soundtrack, and just, be charmed by this game. It's really, really good.
I don't typically get on very well with sort of 2D side scrollers. They've never really been my thing. I've always appreciated the art style. I mean, I think the last one I played before Spiritfarer was Limbo, like years and years and years ago.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's quite a long one, isn't it?
I know you got me Hollow Knight on Steam for Christmas a year or two back, and I really do need to actually play that. But I think it's because I've never really found those types of games to. I never really get lost in them. When I'm playing, when I'm sort of playing like, I don't know, like Skyrim or, like a sort of another sort of, say, 3D game, I feel like the immersion is, I feel it's easier for me to get immersed in those types of
Yeah.
games. But when I'm playing 2D games, I don't feel the same kind of immersion. I feel like I'm always being reminded that I am playing a game, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I definitely get that. I think, we with 2D, I mean, I'm obviously, me and you are very different in that regard because I do really enjoy Metroidvanias, hence the clever name where I swapped a letter for my username on Twitter. But it's there are certain games I think do it a lot better than others, and particularly when it comes to generating an atmosphere and looking visually fantastic at the same time. And you've got games that are you play it in bite-sized chunks like Rogue Legacy, where the idea, the whole premise is that you pick it up, play, die, rinse and repeat. But other games like Spiritfarer, which has got a beautiful soundtrack, a lovely aesthetic, and the same with Hollow Knight as well. A lot of what makes that game so special and so good is the soundtrack, the atmosphere of the game, the storytelling. Those ones are quite rare, and why they're such strong games in that genre. So I think given what you're saying about Spiritfarer, Hollow Knight would be quite a good one to play, but certainly the other games like Rogue Legacy probably not going to be something that you'd enjoy.
Yeah. I mean, I'd say definitely with Spiritfarer, uh, the sort of overcoming of or the lack of immersion isn't there. Like I definitely feel, escapism, and I feel like when I'm playing it, I do feel sort of in that world, and the character. I think she or he, I can't really tell, but the character kind of, it's hard to explain, but it's sort of it. The character kind of gives off this warm presence, like
Yeah,
like they want to help people or animals, and I feel like by extension of that character, I want to do as much as I can to help everyone around me. The character just kind of embodies this, warm kind of approachability, and I sort of I quite like the quite like the character. I don't even know if the character has a name. I can't recall.
Stella.
Stella. There we go.
Yeah,
But it's yeah, and obviously you've got the little cat that follows you around,
yeah.
which is cool. So yeah.
Yeah, no, it's very, very nice game. That's the game I've played the most this week as well. I think I'm quite a bit further than you
Oh, you will
in
be.
terms
Yeah.
of the game, but it's stunning game, lovely. I can't really add any more commentary into what I said last week about it. It's still engaging even with more stuff in, and it's got to me a few times because the premise of the game is literally you guide the spirits to death basically, and it's
Yeah.
help them into the afterlife. So the description of the game obviously sets the tone, and
It sounds really morbid, doesn't it, when you sort of think about it? But
when you're reading the description, yes, and then you kind of start playing it and you're thinking it's like a lovely, charming, happy game. So
yeah.
but it's got me a few times. It's been quite a tough play at times because of it, but it's fantastic. I'm looking forward to going back to it and playing it when I just want to chill out and do some fishing, grow some crops, do some little exploration bits and that. So
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's good. It feels really intuitive as well. I like the kind of puzzles that it gives you, and things that are just out of reach. And if you go and do this mission, and then you unlock this ability to double jump, then you can come back and reach that. It doesn't feel like anything's overly complicated. It's just a very kind of easy, like you say, very relaxed sort of exploration game, but in a 2D realm, which is impressive. Like I said, I don't really generally kind of I don't generally get lost in those worlds.
Yeah, and it's funny you mentioned the whole idea like you find ability. You have to certain places you can only go with certain abilities or certain upgrades, which is it's a trademark of the Metroidvania gameplay that you get an ability like a double jump, for
Yeah,
example, in like in Axiom Verge or Hollow Knight, and that means that you can reach an area that you may have seen before, but you can't reach it again. It's the whole premise of Metroid, really.
yeah,
But it does it in a kind of a nice, chilled out, relaxing way, and it's not so much in your face. It's not like it's not platforming or anything like that. It's literally you now get an upgrade, which means you can now travel to this area on the map. So it's quite laid back in that regard, which is good. So
yeah. I don't know why I kind of got like Oprah Winfrey vibes from you there. It's like, you get an upgrade, and you get an upgrade.
everyone gets an upgrade.
Everyone gets an upgrade. Check under your seats. Woo!
Oh, very good. No, it's yeah, very good. I kind of just talking about it again just makes me want to go back and play it, which is always a good sign.
Yeah, indeed.
So yeah, so that game, I played the exact same thing as you in terms of Spiritfarer. One game I've dipped back to, which has actually been taking a bit of my time this week as well. I've gone back and started playing the original Destiny
Oh
on
God.
PS4. I managed to get the Destiny the collection, which is the base game and all the DLC for I think it was like £5 or something ridiculously cheap. Where I saw it and thought, right, now's the time to jump in, and I bought the game. I want to say last year or the year before, and because it came with all the DLC, one thing that Destiny, the first game, doesn't do a good job of is introducing people to the main storyline content first of all, and then introducing you to the DLC. Literally, you join the game and there's icons everywhere, and you don't. What I found that I started playing the main game and accidentally started the DLC at the same time, so I was getting really confused and thinking, what is the main story here? How am I meant to do this in order? So I put it down. Didn't play it for quite some time, and then I've picked it back up again over the past week, and I've been blasting through the story, and I'm literally using a guide, and not a guide on how to do the missions or anything like that, literally a guide on what's the main story content, what's expansion 1's content, what's expansion 2's content, and trying to go through it that way. And I'm really enjoying it. Playing completely by myself. I see people online when you're playing the game, you see people in the same world as you are, but I've set my fire team to private. Don't want anyone else to join my game. I just want to play the game and play through. And loving the soundtrack. Obviously, it's Marty O'Donnell. Clear influence on that soundtrack. It's great. The gameplay is fantastic in terms of the gunplay. One of the strongest things about Halo was how the guns felt and how they. And one of the biggest criticisms actually since Bungie left the Halo franchise is that Halo 4 and Halo 5, all the weapons feel like really lasery. They don't have the same oomph and they're not as fun to use. I'm finding that with Destiny, that's really enjoyable. So no, it's good. It's quite good to go back to it. I want to try and get through Destiny 1 and start getting through Destiny 2 before the wipe load of the worlds. I know something that's caused a bit of controversy. It's
Yeah,
controversy about Destiny 2.
yeah.
I think it's quite in a good way is that at some point in November, all these worlds are going to be wiped off and you can't revisit them. And
Well,
there's a bit.
they're not gone permanently, so
No, but
they're
it's
taking it.
story,
Yeah,
isn't it?
yeah. Well, I think they're taking away Titan, Mars, and then like something, maybe one or two others, and then they're reintroducing like 3 or 4 other worlds. And then like I think it's like on a like an annual cycle. So every year there'll be like a rotation of worlds. So like some worlds will go out, some worlds will come back in. I think they've started with these particular worlds because they're the least played in the current meta or something. I don't know all the specifics, but
Yeah.
I think that's why.
From what I gather, it's obviously going to save them more stuff to update or manage in the real world. Some of these
Yeah.
worlds aren't visited by many players, but what I think is quite good about the way they've done it is they've linked it into the current story narrative in terms of why those worlds are disappearing, which I think is going to be it's quite a good way to add to the lore whilst taking worlds away or taking content away. I think that's what's meant that people have actually got on board with this idea. But I want to get through Destiny 1. Destiny 2, I know the bulk game is free to play, and they've just added the expansions on Game Pass. So I'm
Yeah.
hoping I can get through it all, but I know I've got a hell of a lot of content to get through all at once. So
What's your kind of end game with Destiny?
I literally just want to first Destiny, get through the story content, find out what happens before I start Destiny 2, and then Destiny 2. Again, I'll try and get through the DLCs, and I think with Destiny 2, that's when I'm going to start exploring maybe some of the raids or some of the more end game content. We'll see. I know
Yeah.
I'm literally talking about hours and hours of content here, so I might get back to the end of Destiny 2's DLC, and the new DLC might come out or something along those lines. So I'm not going to treat it like an MMO though, like Final Fantasy, where you're chasing the end game and things like that.
You say that, but if you get into it, then you start chasing the end game.
I think I definitely see the appeal of it. I think the thing for me is that I do have when I was really into Final Fantasy 14, I felt like I could get involved in the end game quite a fair bit, but I don't have the same free time that I did when I was playing Final Fantasy 14 than I do as I do now. So the time restriction's a big one that stops me from being able to engage with the end game of MMOs and these type of games as a service as much. So
I think on the subject of time, I mean, I certainly understand what you're saying, but when it comes to like a Destiny 2 raid, I mean, it depends on your team. I mean, so I've seen some speed runs of raids on Destiny last about 25 minutes long. That's like insane kind of speed running. Other times it might be, say 2 or 3 hours. But it depends what time you have and what games you're playing. I wouldn't say, you don't have to be you don't have to be like you don't have to like no life it and just play Destiny for like 15 hours a day to be competitive. You can
no,
you can get to the sort of the light level required to do raids. I think the hardest thing with raids is doing the raids with a team that you can keep together. I only ever did the first, I think, 2 or 3 raids. I did Leviathan, I think I did like Curse of Osiris, and then one other one. I can't quite remember all the names of them, but
right.
I did a few raids on Destiny 2 on the Xbox, and it was a bit of a mixed bag. I didn't have enough friends to play like Destiny 2 with, so I relied on kind of like looking for groups and matchmaking through the Xbox sort of party finder. And if you got a really good group that were prepared to kind of like wipe, reset, work out what went wrong, go back in, do it again, you could get through it fairly quickly. But there's so many times where you'd be in a raid and like someone would make one mistake and then someone would quit and then you wouldn't be able to replace them or find someone else in time, so someone else would quit and it just fall apart.
Yeah,
so
I can't be dealing with that.
yeah,
I can't be
so
dealing with that.
that is the hardest thing. The actual content, it can be difficult and
Yeah.
challenging, but it's not. I wouldn't say it's difficult or challenging in a way that you have to kind of no life it. Just play that game. Like it's kind of it's sort of fair. I'd say the rating's fairly casual compared to like Final Fantasy 14. Um, but yeah, good luck
Yeah.
to you. I mean, I wouldn't say the story is why I would play Destiny personally.
No, no, and I
But
think I think that's clear. I would argue, and I think I mentioned it before, and direct when me and you were talking about the Halo franchise, and we're talking about the stories in Halo 1, 2, 3, Reach, and ODST. Or just the Halo lore in general. The One of the frustrating things about Halo is that the stories in the games aren't that good. They kind of in between the games, they they don't really explain much, and particularly like with Halo Reach, it there's that scene where George, one of the Spartans that you're with, sees uh, what's she called now, Dr. Halsey, who is the creator of the Spartan 2 project, and he calls her mum, and there's kind of a relationship there. And then Halo 5 does the same as well, where there's a talk there, and all of a sudden, all Master Chief's buddies that are meant to have died on Halo, which is a game where he's the last Spartan alive, are all just suddenly with him again. There's no explanation, and the idea is that you've got to read books outside of it. So I don't think Bungie have ever been able to tell very strong stories without like all this extra lore which you have to be involved with to get the story. But their gameplay atmosphere, the art styles that they use are completely unrivaled for each of well, that's what make the games so engaging with the stories. The atmosphere, the Covenant, was quite an interesting one. When you saw the what are they called now? What do you call those guys floating in the chairs? What do you call them? The prophets. They, how they played like such villainous characters, and they were engaging, whereas the story may not have been overall. So I'm enjoying Destiny 1. I'm liking the idea of exploring I'm very early on. I think I'm just in Venus at the moment. So I've just done, you've got Earth in old Russia. You've then got the moon, and then you're in Venus. And particularly the moon, when you're going through and you're exploring the hive, I thought that was really engaging. I really wanted to see more of that, but
Yeah.
we will see. And I understand that it was one of the big criticisms in the reviews about Destiny 1 is that the story was really poor, and the story in Destiny 2 is meant to be better, but it's never going to be as good as, other strong story narratives, because in some aspect you play an MMO, and an MMO I don't think can really have a massive engaging story to some degree. It has a story, but it's not going to be your Last of Us or your God of Wars or things like that. So
Yeah, I feel like with Destiny and Halo, like the story, I always start off interested, but then I just get lost in like the just mindless, just running down grunts with machine guns and grenades and mounting wraiths and sticking plasma grenades down the hatches, and I just get lost in the carnage.
yeah,
I think the story is certainly cool and it's there. I think with maybe with Halo, you'd probably get more of the story if you were to, say go and read the books rather than rely on the game to tell you it. But I think I sort of remember like pieces of each game, but I would never say the story is why I've played Halo or why I
no.
played Destiny. It's kind of just the gun gameplay and the violence.
And I think what's telling is that when you read the books of Halo, for example, and you understand all the lore behind it, that story is really quite an interesting story. But then if you were just to play the games, you wouldn't get that story,
Yeah,
because it would tell you that it kind of, the unwritten expectation from Bungie in the Halo franchise, and now 343, is that if you want to understand the story, you need to read the books. And I think that is to a detriment as well, particularly if you've played through Halo 1, 2, 3, 4, and then 5, and there's random Spartans turning up and they make references to events that have happened in the books, and you're thinking, where's all this come from?
yeah,
Wouldn't want to be that person who only plays the games, get to Halo 5 and just be completely lost. Although the argument with Halo 5 is that, the story or the gameplay wasn't fun, and Halo 4 had a good story, but the gameplay wasn't fun. So
yeah, yeah. I've got two books on my bedside table, and I have for a while.
right.
The first book is by David Goggins, Can't Hurt Me,
Yep.
and the second book is The Fall of Reach.
Oh,
Those have been like my two bedside books for a while.
yeah, what a book that is. The Fall of Reach is a really good book. They actually turned it into a comic book series as well, and of course there's a film of it as well which you can watch on the Halo channel for free on the Xbox, which is quite good.
Yeah, yeah. Is it on the Waypoint app or something?
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's it. Yeah, so I suppose if you want to, I don't know how those hold up. I've only got personal experience of reading the book, but the book was very good. Kind of gave you a bit more insight into Master Chief's character, how he got picked for the role, and what happened to those kids during that process,
yeah,
which should have been explained in the game. It should have forced you to read something just to understand what the point of these characters. I understand when books add something to the narrative, but not the expectation that to understand the narrative you have to read the books. It's
yeah.
uh, it's yeah. I could go on for that. I could go on about that for the days, but
Should
it's
we cover
definitely
some
not.
news then?
Yeah,
Before we do,
before I fall down into my Bungie rage. So
there's some other rabbit holes and rages for you to go into,
yeah, this might be my last podcast, Dan. You give me some credit. Give me the last conversation I have about Halo
if I'm
before,
lucky.
if you're lucky, before this cold turns into something worse. But I don't think it will. We'll see. Only next week can tell. So news-wise, we, me and you had a chat at the end of the podcast last week, and we thought we'd do something a little bit different because obviously we had some big news last week, and that took up pretty much all the airtime, the PlayStation 5 reveal, and then the Nintendo Mini. But me and you like different things, and obviously our fans who are going to be listening to the podcast are going to like different things as well. So, kind of, well, why don't you tell what we decided at the end of the podcast?
What we were talking about, what you mean, what we're going to do on this week's episode, or?
Well, basically how we're going to start going about the news and how we're going to
Right.
start going through the news articles.
Well, I think we're just talking about the idea that it would be cool to bring a couple of different things to talk about each week. So, whatever kind of stands out to us throughout the week, and then we can kind of come into this podcast and talk about it. And maybe some of the articles or things that we've been looking at are the same as each other. And in other weeks, I might have been looking at things that you haven't, or vice versa. So.
Yeah, no, it's good. It was a good suggestion from me. I definitely think it's something that worked well for the show. So, I think the biggest news then that I wanted to bring to to discuss on the podcast was that Bethesda has been bought by Microsoft. I think it would be it's the biggest acquisition of a game studio that I've ever seen in terms of the potential impact, but also that it was $7.5 billion. It's not the biggest game acquisition ever, but it's I think it's the second. It's 3 times more than Microsoft have bought Mojang for the Minecraft IP and the studios. But that means that Microsoft, who was aware that it was struggling with first party content for reason people to be engaged in their first party games. They had Halo in years, but beyond that, they were very limited in what they had. They made those different studios. They bought Obsidian and now another studios, and now they own Fallout, Elder Scrolls, Prey, Doom, Wolfenstein. I'm trying to think of any others. Oh, and Dishonored. So some like really, really big names. Obviously, the highlights out of those two are going to be the Elder Scrolls and Fallout. They're the biggest, probably the most popular IP out of those. But clearly, it's going to have a massive impact in terms of Xbox's, the Xbox's first party lineup. Massive, new talent that's gone in there. But also, what are your thoughts on this in terms of how this is going to impact Sony in the future?
So my initial reaction when it kind of broke earlier in the week was like, wow, that's massive. Like, that's huge. Like,
yeah,
wow. But as I sort of thought about it more and more and more, I understand why Microsoft have done it and why they've bought the studio. They've obviously made a pledge to invest in studios, and they're not done. There's no doubt going to be more acquisitions as we move forward into the next generation. But
yeah, of course.
When I sort of when I looked at it, as big as Bethesda are, I feel like a lot of people are looking at Bethesda through those sort of rose-colored lenses. Is that the saying? When you sort of look at something sort of favorably and sort of ignore the negatives. And
yeah, exactly.
I sort of feel like with Bethesda, there's no denying Oblivion, well, Morrowind, Oblivion, Skyrim were all amazing games in their own right. They've all, been incredibly successful. Not as into the Fallout franchise, but obviously Fallout 3 was very successful. Fallout 4, I think, was also very successful. Fallout, did they do Vegas, or did they have? Because I'm pretty sure, was that Obsidian or someone else that did that?
Yeah, so it was Bethesda published it, but it was Obsidian that actually created, which is funnily enough also owned by Microsoft now. So they own both of those studios.
So I understand looking at that feels like that's very impressive. Like, that's a win. But in terms of like more recently, like Fallout 76, that was an absolute mess. And I think to this day, some people will argue it still is. Doom is obviously very successful. That's been one of the more sort of successful sort of relaunches of a sort of like an older franchise. the Wolfenstein games, I think they started off strong, but I mean the most recent one, I think his sort of the two daughters of the main
Oh,
guy,
Youngblood.
I don't think that generally was very well received. It had
No.
microtransactions galore. It was sort of quite a negative launch. So I don't feel like the Wolfenstein franchise is really anything to sort of boast about. I certainly wouldn't buy an Xbox Series X just to play Wolfenstein.
No.
Prey, like, has there been a Prey game in how many years? Like,
So they did the reboot, didn't they?
did they?
Yeah.
You know?
It's funny you say this because I do genuinely think that out of anything that Arcane's done recently, so Arcane Studios, they did the Dishonored franchise and Dishonored 1, Dishonored Death of the Outsider, Dishonored 2, and Prey. Prey is my absolute favourite out of all of them. In fact, it's probably one of my I've enjoyed, most enjoyable experiences.
I remember it on the 360. Like, I can kind of
Yeah,
remember it coming out, and I remember playing a demo or briefly playing the game, but I certainly never sort of bought it and completed it, or I don't have like fond nostalgia
yeah,
attached to that
they're very different.
franchise.
They're very different games now because the original Prey was like based in Native American ideology, not ideology, but kind of I'm trying to think of that word, but it had some kind of Native American themes to the game, whereas the Prey reboot is literally a first-person shooter that feels, in my view, feels like a cross between BioShock and Dead Space, and it's fantastic. It is
Yeah.
very enjoyable.
But
But of
again,
course, that came out and it didn't sell very well.
would you buy a console to play it? Maybe you would, but would the
Not
majority of
many would.
people? I
No,
don't
it
think
didn't.
so.
It didn't sell very well at all.
So
So
I feel like the acquisition of Bethesda and the excitement around that is based on them re sort of re-emerging as this powerhouse, which they once were. There's no denying, like certainly after Oblivion and Skyrim, Fallout, like from the 360 generation, incredibly successful. And it's this generation where, aside from Fallout 4, which I don't think is sort of as positively received as 3,
no,
um, they've not done much.
no. I
I
think.
feel like, just to touch on this for a second, I feel like the acquisition of Bethesda can in some ways be compared to their acquisition of Rare. When they bought Rare obviously were very successful in the Nintendo 64 sort of era,
Mm.
and then coming into the sort of the 360 era, they well, I don't know if they did they have very much on the original Xbox. They must have done something.
They
Like,
had some stuff. I know they released Morrowind on it, on the original Xbox.
Rare.
Oh, sorry, I meant Bethesda. The original Xbox.
Yeah.
Um,
I'm saying like Rare, sort of between like the N64 era and the sort of 360 era, when they kind of came under Microsoft's wing. Like they weren't, like, I don't feel
it was
like they.
Perfect Dark, wasn't it?
Yeah,
Perfect Dark and Viva Pinata, and that was pretty
yeah.
much two that I could think
So
of.
like the 360, they were sort of, it was like their talent was wasted. I mean, they did the avatar system for the 360 and like all that,
Yeah,
like the avatar clothing, and I think they did like do like Connect Sports, or they did like a Connect, like a Connect game of
yeah,
some
that's right.
kind.
Yeah,
So it's kind of like Rare weren't really utilized very well, and then Sea of Thieves has come along, and that's been incredibly successful, and Everwild, and you feel like Rare's back, like they've brought Rare
yeah,
to
yeah.
life, and maybe they can do the same with Bethesda. And obviously, I feel like the big game on the horizon for Bethesda is Elder Scrolls 6. I mean, that's, if
Yeah.
you're looking at the purchasing of that studio, you're thinking Elder Scrolls 6 is going to be a system seller. Like that, I would buy a Series X if it was console exclusive to play it on that console. If it's on PC, then I'll just
Oh
buy it
yeah,
on
of
PC,
course.
obviously. But I don't know. I don't think I think it's big, and it certainly shifts the industry, but I don't think it's as big as people are making it out to be.
I think the thing that this carries, the one thing, I think you're absolutely right. I think obviously we look back at Skyrim, which came out in 2011, and then you had Fallout 4, which came out in 2015.
Yeah,
They're the two last games that they made that were really successful in terms
yeah,
of their I'm talking about Bethesda Game Studios. Of course,
Yeah,
Doom is really popular at the moment. People are liking that. Dishonored 2, I don't think hit as well as the first Dishonored, of course the other games that they publish as well. But Skyrim is still a game that they could, they're still able to re-release it, and because people still will buy it because it's such a good game. And obviously, it's now a bit dated when you compare it to things like The Witcher 3, but there's still a charm and exploration that you can get. And when
yeah,
people are like, oh, you can play it on a handheld device now, you can literally sit on the train or in a park and play Skyrim, and people are willing to go back into that that game. I reckon maybe 95% of people that bought Skyrim on Switch already had played Skyrim somewhere else, but they're playing it because they like the world, the experience, and then they could play it on the go. Fallout 4, I don't think had that same gravitas. It was an okay game. It was enjoyable, but you're absolutely right. They started trying to delving into the online the games for service space, and they released Fallout 76. They released the Elder Scrolls Online, and they just haven't hit half as well as these. So I think they know this, which is why they've kind of gone back, and they know that the hype is there for the Elder Scrolls 6 and for Starfield as well, which is the game that's going to come out before Elder Scrolls. So we
yeah,
know we're not going to see Elder
yeah.
Scrolls for a considerable period of time, and we don't know anything about Starfield apart from it's sci-fi, which is different from what we've seen from Bethesda Game Studios before. So it will see. I think the thing that's going to really get people involved is that the fact that they've got that IP, and that
Yeah,
IP is
yeah,
I think the IP
it's a
is really
win, isn't it?
valuable.
Yeah,
The game studio could not be, but one thing that I've seen flying on the internet, which people are which is tantalizing to me, is does this mean now that Obsidian will work again with Bethesda to create a new Fallout game? Because
maybe.
arguably the best Fallout game and the most enjoyable Fallout game in recent years was Fallout New Vegas. Now, not at launch. At launch, it was a absolute buggy mess. It was completely atrocious. It was unplayable. But when they fixed it, people couldn't deny the fact that the storylines, the quests, the things they added into Fallout 3 were better than Fallout 3. It was the best
Yeah.
Fallout game. And then the game they released after that kind of felt really bland by comparison. Who knows? We could end up with a new Fallout New Vegas 2. That would be and if that was exclusive to Xbox, that would be really
Well, I
interesting.
think that's the thing. I think it's what remains unclear right now is exactly what will be exclusive to the Xbox and what will be available on PC and PlayStation. I think that's the thing, isn't it? Like
Yeah,
we
exactly.
don't
Yeah.
yet know how this impacts everything. Uh,
No.
I think there's a couple of games I don't know very much about them, but a couple of games that I think Bethesda are publishing, and that was Ghostwire Tokyo and Deathloop. That quite a lot of people are also mentioning those games,
Yeah.
which I think I don't know if they're going to be again sort of exclusive to Xbox or if there's going to be timed exclusives, for a certain amount of time, and then after a month, 6 months, a year, much like the sort of Final Fantasy VII remake, will these games then come to the PlayStation 5 later on?
Yeah, it
It's
is
going to be interesting.
interesting
Mm.
because I think with Deathloop, for example, we know Deathloop is a PS5 exclusive, and I think they've come out since then and said that they will honor those
Yeah.
exclusive deals. However, how much of that is them honoring it, or they're being
Well,
contractually obliged to
it's
actually go ahead and release those things exclusive for the console?
well the platforms it says for Deathloop were PlayStation 5 and Microsoft Windows.
So
So I
that'll
don't.
be PC potentially, yeah.
Yeah, and same for Ghostwire Tokyo. So
Yeah. But then
yeah,
who know? Because of that, it's caused uncertainty about whether these are going to be exclusive to Xbox consoles going forward, or is Xbox still pushing it? Because they're now changed their tact in terms of how they're competing, and they're now pushing to be more of almost like a platform with Game Pass. Will they be quite happy to have these consoles sold on PlayStation, and they'll get the revenue from that and have them available on Xbox and on PC through Game Pass and be
yeah,
able to make revenue that way? I think, you know, who knows what's going on with Microsoft. If it was PlayStation that were doing it, then it'd be clear it was to be staying on PlayStation. But the way that Microsoft have changed their tact in terms of how they are, competing in the next generation, it creates uncertainty. We're not sure. So But yeah, I
Yeah.
thought that was quite a big piece of news that was making the rounds on the internet, and definitely worth bringing up.
Did you see the we've mentioned this Twitter profile last week, the Kaz Hirai, the ex-CEO troll account, and he
Yeah.
said like we're pleased to announce, or he said like PS5 exclusive news, PS5 to become the first new console to exclusively not have Skyrim ported to it.
Oh, very
I
good.
just
Very
love
good.
like Sony bias in that, in that profile, and how he just twists even anything remotely positive in Xbox or Microsoft, twists it so that it's favourable to Sony.
Yeah, proper winding up everybody with it. So
It's great. I don't think it would be as funny if it weren't for the profile picture and the Twitter banner. It's absolutely brilliant. I love it. It's probably my
I
favourite profile on Twitter.
Oh, it's great, and it's still one of the few one of the few places where the PlayStation Vita still gets mentioned. So
Yeah.
hold that hope,
And
hold
for
that hope.
anyone wondering, it's Kaz Hirai CEO, at Kaz
Yeah,
Hirai CEO, if you want to check it out.
very good, very good.
So, I think we had some other topics we were going to cover.
Yeah, what have you got?
We might as well carry on with the sort of the studio acquisition, but this time a rumor that's circulating. I saw this on Twitter earlier on, and the rumored studio purchase SEGA. And there's a sort of conspiracy theory brewing at the moment about a potential announcement coming over the next 24, 48 hours at some point over the Tokyo Games Show, which is live now.
Yeah, yeah.
There's an official Sega tweet that shows I don't know, a member of staff of fans, someone over a table with an X, their arms kind of crossed in an X and some sort of, I think, loosely translated Japanese. And there was I think some sort of reveal by the official Xbox. I think it's to do with the customizable controllers, and people have actually gone as far as identifying the exact RGB code in Photoshop to match the coloring
God.
the Sega logo. It's the exact same RGB or HTML, whatever it is, code. So that there's, I mean, it could very well be a reach, and I personally don't usually buy into conspiracy theories, but it's certainly very, very intriguing, the timing of this. You know, the tweet by Sega, the tweet by Xbox, the fact that the Tokyo Game Show is kicking off, and what better place to announce a acquisition of a Japanese studio than at the TGS show or the Tokyo
Yeah.
Game Show.
I mean, it's interesting. I mean, I know that Phil Spencer mentioned a while ago that he did want to purchase a Japanese game studio of some sort because Xbox, when you look at their first party lineup, or generally actually, they don't have much Japanese games that are exclusive to that console.
Yeah.
And I know they made a go of it with the 360 with Lost Odyssey and with Blue Dragon and those type of games that came out to try and punch into the Japanese market, which didn't work. So they could be potentially looking at this. I don't think I'm as sold on this as you, but I definitely, if it was true, then that would be again a massive win because Sega owns Atlas, and Atlas creates Persona, and Persona is released. The mainline series are PlayStation exclusive, and the spin-offs, the Q series and Scramble, come out on the 3DS and Nintendo systems. So if this was true, that means that Microsoft then will be publishing games on all their competitors' game fronts and all of their storefronts, which would be crazy.
Yeah, it's like I say, it's a reach, and whilst it sounds like I'm buying into it, make no mistake, I'm not by any means saying, I believe that the sort of combination of images, is enough to, it's not an airtight leak. I wouldn't sort of stand by it, but I certainly think it's interesting, and it's sort of it's kind of in the direction that Microsoft's heading. If they're
Yeah.
if they're really trying to compete with PlayStation, acquiring existing studios is certainly a good way of doing that. You don't just make a game studio and
No.
expect it to be successful. These studios take time, and you've got to build up a portfolio, and get the right people in there, and get that philosophy, and that sort of team chemistry, and if they can get existing developers to develop games exclusively for the Xbox ecosystem, then it's a massive win. And I think there's sort of an unanswered part of your sort of point before about about the sort of Bethesda acquisition. You sort of asked what I thought, and the one point I didn't make, and it kind of ties into this, is that I don't think Sony are sweating. I really don't. I think the existing first party exclusives, based solely on this generation, I really struggle when it comes with Xbox to think of a game that I would buy an Xbox for. I really struggle, and especially with this, sort of seemingly sort of more, apparent relationship with the PC, and the fact that things like Halo Infinite is coming out on PC. It's not just an Xbox game; it's a PC game. When I look at PlayStation, just based on this last generation alone, like Spiderman and Death Stranding and Uncharted, Horizon Zero Dawn, the Quantic Dream games, some of these games, of course, have made their way to PC, and Sony have been very transparent with the fact that they are very open to more first-party games making their way to the PC in the future. But I feel like the library, the lineup of PlayStation games right now is so strong that even an acquisition of Bethesda doesn't get me thinking any differently about the lineup of the PlayStation. And I still feel like my heart lies with those games, rather than anything that Microsoft can offer at the moment. I'd love to see that change, but right now that there's no competition for me with between the Xbox Series X and the PlayStation. Although I came very close to purchasing an Xbox, very close. It came very close. I was on the Microsoft website. I was looking at the console. I had it there in the basket, and I was looking at it. And
I mean, you've got a PC, haven't you? And I think Microsoft have been quite clear in that they any first party games that come to Xbox will come to PC. So if you've got both, if you've got PC, you're going to be able to get those first party games at launch as well. I'd be keen to see what happens with this Xbox and Sega news. I mean, ultimately we saw at I can't remember what game show it was. Was it TGS last year or E3, where they announced that they were bringing Phantasy Star Online 2 to, and it was Microsoft thing. They kind of announced that they partnered with Sega to release Phantasy Star Online 2 in the West, and that game was 7 years old, but it was quite an unusual thing. But what I do hope is it doesn't rule out the idea, the rumor that was going around, which I think is even less unsubstantiated than what you said, but with your rumor, was that Sega are going to be releasing a new Dreamcast. Maybe Xbox, maybe Xbox are going to pair up with Sega, and they're going to release a new Dreamcast and call it the Dreamcast One. Release the new Halo on it.
We shall see.
That'd be good. A new Dreamcast. I don't think it's got any place. But it'd be nice for nostalgia reasons, I suppose.
Yeah. I'd be more hyped about an N64 coming back, if I'm being honest, but that's even less. I know there's like that sort of mini classic thing, isn't there, in the works or whatever, but...
Potentially, yeah. It's an interesting thing because they were rumoured to be doing one for the Dreamcast, and people were getting really excited that Sega were teasing a new console, and everyone's like, Sega's doing it. They're actually going to bring out a new console, new Dreamcast. And then they announced it was a Game Gear Mini, which was a celebration of the Game Gear in Japan, and they were preloaded with games, and it was ridiculously small, and you saw the interest on the internet just plummet straight after they made that announcement. So, because let's face it, I love the Game Gear. It was one of my gaming consoles I had as a kid, but it wasn't very popular. In fact, you could speak to most people and don't even know what a Game Gear was. So,
consumer of batteries.
And color screen, good sound, but you couldn't play it for very long.
The only thing
Or
I
at
ever
least,
remember from the Game Gear was Echo the Dolphin. I never had a Game Gear, but I remember playing Echo the Dolphin once at a friend's house. I probably got about 20 minutes into a level and the batteries died.
and that's pretty. That was the biggest
That was the
complaints
last
about
time I
it.
played a Game Gear.
It's funny actually. It kind of shows you how they didn't learn from the mistakes because they released the Game Gear and they had that problem, and then in the US they released the Sega Nomad, which was a handheld Mega Drive, and it took the big fat round batteries, D batteries, and it still only lasted an hour. So
Yeah.
clearly there's a reason why the Game Gear failed, and then the Nomad failed even worse. So
Well, I mean, not to go off on a tangent, but I think the sort of handheld gaming market is really being shaken up by Microsoft with their cloud, is it Cloud X they call it, or
yeah,
the streaming. I mean, I was looking at the Razer Kishi controller on Amazon. I see that quite a lot of people have got the Razer Kishi to play their sort of Xbox games through the streaming, and
looks really nice, doesn't it?
you look at that and you think like how can anything compete with that? I mean, the Switch isn't that old. Was it like 3 years? 3 years old now? 2 or 3 years?
Yeah.
And to me, when I look at like a nice smartphone with the Razer Kishi handset attached to it versus any of the existing handheld consoles, they just look dated.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
It's crazy, and the
it's great.
portability of that as well. It's just your phone, and the two little controllers. You stick them in a little sachet, and then you're away. It's just mental. I mean, obviously, the big thing is data, isn't it? It's consuming. It's you've got to have good data plans or be connected to Wi-Fi. Whereas the Switch and whatever, you don't need that. But I'd be really interested to see where Nintendo go from here. Moving forward, and what their sort of console cycles look like in the
Well,
future.
how they compete with that, really. I mean, like, obviously the thing that Nintendo has is its IP. It's worth so much to people being able to play Zelda and Mario. But we see all these games now that are coming out and they're ported to Switch, and you got The Witcher on Switch, and you look at it and it looks horrendous. It doesn't look good. But people were like, well, it's amazing because I can play Witcher on the go regardless of how it looks, and that is an accomplishment in itself, being able to play something like that on the go. However, you can now play games that look as on I think the architecture of Xbox Game Cloud is they use Xbox One S's. So, but then they stream that over the internet, and you're getting that on the handheld, and that's already a more powerful experience than what you can get on the Switch. And you can play all of Xbox IP on it, and you've got Game Pass, which means that you've already got a library wherever you go. It is quite a tantalizing proposition that they've put forward.
Can you download games and play them without streaming them?
No, you have to stream. It is purely streaming.
Okay.
But obviously, when games
well, of course, because it's like you say, they're streaming the console architecture, aren't they? So
but it's not like if they tried doing this a few years ago, like other game streaming services like OnLive and things like that, there wasn't 5G didn't exist. The networking options didn't exist. Now you've got 5G and data plans. Now you get unlimited data at 5G, and it doesn't cost the end of the earth to have those packages. You know what? You can actually still play. This is now a reality, and it works quite well. I've played it on 4G.
I was going to say,
and that works quite well. So yeah, it'd be interesting to see how they improve that further, and the fact that you don't have to actually play on a phone, which if anyone's tried playing like first-person shooters or anything like that on a phone, it's just a horrendous experience. But having something like the Kishi that you can just stick on the end and it looks good and it actually looks like it controls well.
Yeah.
I'm all in. So we'll see how it goes. I'll be intrigued to see what Nintendo do and how they compete with that going forward.
Yeah, maybe a Nintendo phone.
Nintendo. You know what? Weirder things have happened, haven't there? We got the Nokia N-Gage, didn't we? So why not?
A Nintendo phone with a Razer Switch.
Yeah, and every time you get a notification, it goes, "It's me, Mario."
And when your phone dies and runs out of battery, it goes,
I think we joke about that, but I think in the Japanese market, people would love that,
Oh,
and they
it'd
would
be
buy it for that.
insane, wouldn't it? Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, bro. Well, I suppose obviously, kind of talking about like further news and stuff. If any of you followed me on Twitter, one thing that I kind of wanted to
Here we
highlight,
go.
which is something which is starting to, I've got to admit, it's starting to grate on me a little bit, is the expectation that games companies, game publishers, or game developers have to give you a next gen version with enhancements free of charge, and I'm not sure where it's come from. I think there are game companies out there that are doing it. With, like, for example, The Witcher. They said that they're doing it, which is great. It's nice to have that, and we know that games are going to be, all the games that are playable on Xbox One are going to be backwards compatible on the Xbox Series X. So we know, for example, if you're playing Halo on the Halo One remaster, sorry, bad examples, like Gears Tactics. That's also a bad example because that is a launch title. But you know what I mean. Any game that's available on Xbox One is going to be backwards compatible and playable on the Series X, and it may come in with enhancements. It may not, but you can still play those games on the new hardware. It's kind of this now entitlement that's kind of seeping where any game company that's announces that they're going to be released, their game's going to be backwards compatible. If it doesn't get enhancements, or God forbid you can buy an enhanced version on that console, everyone seems to be up in arms about it. And I'm not sure really where it's, why it's happening, where this kind of expectation happened. I think the one that kicked off the most was Spiderman, the Spider-Man that's going to be released on the PS5. There's a remastered version coming out on PS5. And people are kicking up the fact that they can play their current existing PS4 version on the PS5, but they then have to buy the enhanced version that's going to be available in there.
Yeah.
What do you think about that?
Well, I certainly understand the point you're making, and I know you sort of made the sort of VHS analogy, saying, you wouldn't expect free upgrades from your VHS to, your 4K UHD or whatever Blu-rays.
I've got a Star Wars Return of the Jedi on VHS, and when a DVD player comes out, I demand that I get it on DVD because I once bought it on VHS, and same with Blu-ray. It just seems mad. I mean, it'd be nice if they did offer that, from a consumer-friendly viewpoint. Great, give me a free version of an enhanced experience of what I've already paid for. But I definitely don't think it should be expected that this happens, particularly with games consoles where I can actually put, I can't do it on a VHS. I can't plug a VHS into a DVD player and play that on there. But the fact that on the PS5, I could play the PS4 version of Spider-Man on the PS5, it's actually more friendly in that example that I can still play that on the new console.
I think I think the problem sort of lays within the fact that, some developers have taken, very sort of open and very consumer friendly sort of directions with their next gen upgrades, and in some cases it's just simply, if you own it on the PlayStation 4, then you get the upgrade on the PS5. I mean, I think the Valhalla was confirmed as a free upgrade.
Yep.
Borderlands 3 is a free upgrade. Destiny 2, Hitman 3, if you own it digitally, will be a free upgrade.
Yep.
So, I think the problem is, some developers have come out and made, very consumer-friendly decisions and said, look, if you own the game on the PlayStation 4, then you will own it on the PlayStation 5, and it will be a free next-gen upgrade. And then, other developers have come out and not done that, or done that in mixed ways that have confused people and left people more angry than they were satisfied. So
Yeah.
I think the mistake in some part is on the developer or the publishers, I should say, for confusing people and presenting mixed messages. But then I think it's also on the consumer for kind of assuming this sort of one size fits all approach that if one publisher does it, then everyone should do it. And I think you need to look at each game and each publisher individually and look at whether or not they are going down this free upgrade route or whether or not they are going down the paid upgrade route. And as long as they're clear and transparent about which of those they're taking, I don't see where there's any room for sort of anger. I think if a publisher is very clear about the fact that you've got to pay for an upgrade and then you get irate about that, well, they were clear about it.
Yeah, exactly. And I
you know
think, it is a nice to have. I think, the fact that some of these publishers or game developers are offering this upgrade free of charge, it is definitely nice to have. You know that there's going to be a version of that game that's going to look better on your new shiny console, and it hasn't cost you a penny. I think that is very consumer friendly, and I personally would really like that. It's just the idea that it's demanded. First of all, it was demanded that the next gen consoles have to be backwards compatible, and then there was a lot of pressure from that, and then they've made that happen. And now it's like, right, but now it has to be backwards compatible, and it has to be a better version of the game that I already paid for. I just think that there shouldn't be that expectation, and we don't expect it from any other medium, so why do we expect it on this? And I get the idea that, for example, you play, you buy a game on PC, and you might be playing it on an old graphics card, and then you get a better version of the graphics card and it looks better. But there are games that are remastered on PC as well, and the expectation is that you either buy them again or you pay a small fee to a discounted price to get that newer version.
yeah
And certainly not a lot of game developers go back and basically add like RTA, add ray tracing back in old games and things like that. Like, for example, Spiderman is going to have Spider-Man 4 is going to have ray tracing, which is only available on the new console. So yeah, I definitely ruffled up a few feathers of people who were demanding that these games must give me the enhanced version for free. As long as the game's playable on the next gen console, I think that's the minimum of what these companies need to be doing. And if they make a nicer version of it, if they're going to be giving you it, charging a price for it, fair enough. If they're going to give it to free, even better for the consumer. But I
yeah
think it's dangerous if we expect that from everybody and go forward. And particularly then, Twitter's already a dumpster fire when it comes to, vitriol and, going at people and things like that. So it doesn't help them when, they announce a way that they're going to market the game on the new console and actually make it a better experience, and then they get all that flack just for having the audacity to put effort into creating something and then charging people for their work. It just seems I just don't think it's needed.
Yeah, I mean, I think the perhaps even more unpopular opinion that I'm in the minority in feeling. I don't honestly care about bringing the last generation with me. Leave it on the PS4. I want to play PS5 games on the PS5. I want to
Yeah,
play Series X games on the Series X. It's nice at launch if you've got more games to play.
yep,
But as the generation moves into, the first quarter, first year, the appeal of playing games from the previous generation on the next generation, or should we say playing games from the previous generation on the current
mm,
generation, it other than the initial launch window, I don't care. Like,
yeah,
I very rarely go on my Xbox One. Well, in fact, I never go on my Xbox One because I don't even have one anymore. But when I did have one, I very rarely went on it thinking like, oh, I wish I could play games from the 360 on here, or
mm,
or the PS4, which I still have. I wish I could play a PS3 game on here. Like I've got
yeah,
PS4 games to play on the PS4. When I get a console, I'll have PS5 games to play and Xbox Series X games to play. So, I appreciate not everyone sort of feels that sentiment, and I understand that it's perhaps an unpopular opinion, but it's just the way I think. Like, next gen is out, play next gen games. why,
yeah.
why do we play anything else?
And I think you're dead on the money there, because I think the thing is what happens on the internet in terms of the demand that people ask for stuff then doesn't really transfer to what actually people use those consoles for. I saw people kicking off again about Spider-Man because the new Spider-Man won't transfer your PS4 save to the PS5. I'm thinking, why would you want that? If you've completed Spider-Man on PS4, why would you want to boot up a completed version of the game on your new console? But also as well, people kicked off about cross-platform games. Obviously, Sony were resisting, opening up their network to cross-platform. People were like, we need cross-platform. We want it, we want it, we want it. It's been like over a year now since that was brought in, and the list of games that are cross-platform across all consoles is tiny. It's that is the reason why I'm buying a Series X, because I can't, I'm literally coming up to the end of games that I can play with other people who play on Xbox and PC, and obviously this was something that people were, really going hard at Sony for, because Xbox did it and Nintendo did it, and now it's there. No one uses it, or very
Yeah.
few games use it. So, I think, it's definitely nice to have, to know that your purchases that you make on a platform will carry over to the future iterations of that platform. I now know that
Yeah.
I've bought certain games on there. I'm not going to have to go into the attic, dust off the Xbox One, come down, plug it in just to be able to play a game that's on an Xbox One. Yeah, it's nice to have it. More than anything, it's convenient. It means I don't have to do that if I did want to go back and play that game. But the likelihood is that there are games like Oblivion or older games on the Xbox One X now that are available through backwards compatibility that I've got and I haven't gone back to because I don't want to, because they look terrible compared to my new shiny games on the new console.
Yeah.
And game, the way that games play feel better now than they do back then, and they will
Yeah.
do continue going forward. So
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, we'll sort of see how that sort of transpires, I guess, as we sort of move forward, and which publishers or which games do make their way to the next gen, and which games you're gonna have to leave behind.
yeah, exactly. God forbid you're gonna have to play on the additional hardware. So
Or play new
open
games.
or play new games, or dust off and play your games. God forbid, I'm gutted I can't play all my Mega Drive games on my Dreamcast.
Yeah, I think the overwhelming majority of gamers are quite rational, and I think it's the vocal minority that get the attention, and the sort of more irate tweets that seem to get traction because people inevitably respond to them, and then it sort of snowballs from there. I think the majority of people are either completely okay with the fact that if they're going to play a next gen version of a game that has had additional development work done to to make it look better or play better on the new systems, I think most people would be completely okay with the fact that they would have to pay money to play that version of an already existing game. I think the the issue is if the message isn't clear, and if publishers sort of give the impression of a free upgrade but don't fulfill that promise. I think it's the mixed messages which I think create the confusion. I think it's
Yeah,
just
we're
a case
talking
of,
about 505, aren't we, with the
oh,
whole
control,
debacle about
yeah,
control.
yeah,
Again, they've just completely bodged that and just made a massive issue for themselves, where they could have either given the upgrade to everybody or just had the game's going to be available through backwards compatibility.
yeah. Well, but I mean, there's been other controversies because there was the thing with the NBA 2K21 when they announced the because maybe this is more to do with the price, but they came out saying that all like the next gen games are going to be $70 rather than $60, didn't they?
Yeah,
Um,
yeah, they did, yeah.
and I don't know if I could be I might be wrong in saying this, so I apologize if I am, but I think that there's some games which have said I think Control is one of them where you have to have the Ultimate edition for a free upgrade, but
Yeah,
not but if you own the regular edition, then it doesn't apply. So it's kind of like
yeah.
it's one of these additional sort of deluxe edition perks, which
Well, I think the trouble with 505 and with Control is that they said that, like, they
yeah,
said, oh, you have to have the Ultimate Edition to get the upgraded version for free on the next
yeah,
gen, because it's impossible for us to do it with the original version, and then they accidentally did it with the original version, so they kind of showed everyone
yeah,
that they were talking out of their ass.
yeah.
So
In fact, they did do it with NBA because I think you had to buy the Mamba edition, which was a tribute to Kobe Bryant. You had to, I think it cost like $100 or something, so it was like $40 more than a regular sort of 2K21 version. And if you
right,
bought the more expensive version, then you would get the free upgrade. But if you didn't, then you would have to essentially rebuy the game again. So it's
Yeesh.
yeah, but it's that kind of I think it's the mix. I keep coming back to this, but I think it's the mixed messages. I think that's what annoys people. And then there are, of course, people that just expect everything to be free, and they're just as wrong. So
Yeah, of course.
yeah. I think we've got one more bit of sort of news, I think, before we move on.
Oh yeah, what you got?
I think we sort of, I think you mentioned before we recorded that you'd sort of kind of seen this on the interweb as well, but the rumoured re-emergence of Metal Gear Solid coming to PC.
Oh yeah.
I saw a tweet by Push Square, which sort of quoted what has, for the most part, been a very reliable source of leaks, of sort of industry leaks throughout the games industry, and the sort of I think the suggestion was that there might be a Metal Gear Solid sort of re-emergence. Was it Metal Gear Solid 1 and 2, I think, were the...
Yeah, that's what I heard. Yeah, and also
Yeah.
Contra, I think, and Castlevania. But we've seen the Contra and Castlevania stuff already because they did the collections of those, which released
Yeah.
on major
It's
platforms and
basically
Switch.
Konami, isn't it? Konami stuff sort of making a comeback.
Yeah, so it'll be interesting to see if this is a exclusive to PC or whether they're going to be releasing it across other platforms as well.
Well, the Push Square article suggested it was a PS5 console exclusive, and
Right.
PC, or it's coming to PS5 and PC. So, console exclusive being PS5, and then obviously PC being sort of, I guess, not really considered a console platform. But
Yeah.
that would that would certainly be very, very interesting
Yeah.
if that was true.
And is it the do we know yet if it's the original Metal Gear Solid 1 or 2 that's coming out, or is it a remastered version, or
So, well, let me bring up. I'll pull up the article real quick. So it basically said that according to the YouTube channel Red Gaming Tech, which have provided accurate leaks in the past, but more so to do with like hardware rather than software. Um,
right?
Apparently, there is a supposed Metal Gear Solid revival, which is a full remake, not just a port or a remaster, but a full remake. So I guess much like the Final Fantasy VII remake.
Right, okay, yeah.
It's saying that the Metal Gear Solid 2, 3, and 4 are all being re-released. Metal Gear Solid 2, 3, and 4 are all being re-released, but it sounds like they're set to be just remasters rather than full remakes.
All right, okay.
Unclear whether they're coming to the PS5 as well or if they're just targeting PC. We don't know how far into development Metal Gear Solid Remake is, but its rumoured existence does tie into reports heard elsewhere. For starters, we know that Sony has been flashing its cash to third-party publishers in order to lock down exclusive PS5 deals, Final Fantasy
Yeah.
16 being an example of that. A remake of Metal Gear Solid, arguably the most beloved installment in a series synonymous with PlayStation, certainly fits the bill when you consider that Sony dished out additional dash blah 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 blah.
Yeah, I hope that is true. I definitely hope that is true because obviously, there were rumors going around as well about Silent Hill being remade for exclusive PlayStation, and we haven't
Yeah,
heard anything more about those rumors. But particularly, like Metal Gear Solid, um, it is one of the PlayStation classic games. In fact, I've got my PlayStation Classic here. Let me look at the back of the box. Is it even on here? Yeah, original Metal Gear Solid on the PlayStation Classic. It's one of those games that you think of the console and you think PlayStation. So it
yeah.
would be nice to kind of see the PS5 get that game on there.
I remember, just to digress for a second somewhat, I remember being 10 years old in my final class of the day at middle school, and it was an art class. And I remember the classroom window looked over the car park where the parents would park to pick you up.
Right.
And I knew on that day, because I saved up my pocket money and I'd given it to my mum. I knew on that day that I'd asked her to go out and get me Metal Gear Solid 1 on the PlayStation.
Right.
And I remember throughout the day looking at my watch, working out where she would be at what point in the day, and whether or not by whatever time it was on my watch, whether or not by that point she'll have bought it. you know. And I remember sort of getting to like 2 o'clock thinking, well, she must have bought it by now because she's got to come and pick me up from school. So she has to have bought the game already. And then 2:30 and thinking, yes, I'm half an hour away from getting out of school, half an hour away from getting into the car and Metal Gear Solid being on the chair. And school finished, and it was there. It was in the car, it was
Yeah.
waiting for me, and it was the sort of double disced box on the PlayStation, the plastic case with the manual inside on the back side of the box, and it had that glorious red text, with the sort of the grey background and Snake in the kind of, I don't know, that sort of really sort of sketched out sort of concept art looking design, but it was just absolutely amazing, and super fond memories of that.
Yeah, no, it's one of those games that's just fantastic. I remember picking up the demo disc and having the demo, which was the just before you these. I think the demo was quite big. I think it was just before you found Meryl.
With the dark.
Yeah, that was it. Yeah, and then the demo ended. But I remember being blown away by how cinematic it was, and there was no game really like it at the time.
No.
It took a while to get used to. You thinking, oh, the X button's jump. No, it's crawl. Okay, right. Okay, let's try that again.
I remember reading a article quite a while ago about Hideo Kojima's inspiration for Metal Gear Solid, and I think he said it's something like it came from him playing hide and seek with his kids. Like that sort of that kind of got his initial, and I think this is probably predating Metal Gear Solid and going back sort of more toward like Metal Gear, the original, which I think that sort of came in like the late 80s, it was like 87 or something, the original Metal Gear.
That was right. Yeah.
That was sort of the inspiration, and of course heavily influenced by Escape from New York with Kurt Russell, the Snake Plissken character, which which Snake is sort of very much a resemblance of. And then in Metal Gear Solid 2, his code name was Iroquois Pliskin, which was a nice little sort of Easter egg for Escape from New York fans. But yeah, it's going to be interesting, really, really interesting.
Yeah,
It'd be nice to see that come back for sure.
Yeah, and there was we almost kind of got like a little tease of this of what it would look like. I was absolutely blown away when I played Metal Gear Solid 4, which was basically just a pure fan service. And spoilers, if you haven't played it, it's been years and years now, so you've had your chance. But that moment where you go back to Shadow Moses and you play what it looked like on the PS1, and you go in the bit, you go up the lift, and then it fades to black, and then it's like in next gen, and like the snow's like blowing across the screen.
Yeah.
Oh, what a scene. It was just like, wow, very well impressed.
Yeah.
So just thinking what that looks like winning on a PS5 would just be fantastic. So.
I'd go as far to say that Metal Gear Solid 4 might be the best one out of all of them. Yeah. I honestly, I really feel that way. I just think there's just so many epic moments. It felt like a Hollywood production. And I think it was amazing because of the fact that it was on the PS3. Obviously there'd been installments of the game that had come before it, and it was a tried and tested formula. The sort of Kojima team within Konami was full swing. But there's just so much. I mean, in all the games there was memorable moments, but in Metal Gear Solid 4, you had the, like you say, the revisitation of or revisiting of Shadow Moses, the sequence with Raiden cutting off his arm and diving in front of the submarine or the sub vessel before it squashed Solid Snake, crawling down the radiation tunnel and your controllers like vibrating. It's just an insane vibration in the control, and you're just mashing the circle button or whatever it is to just keep Snake crawling, and he's gradually like his armor's like peeling off with the intense heat, and it's just that sort of epic kind of, like, you even like begin to question, like, am I even going to get to the end of this tunnel? Am I going to just, am I just going to die here?
Yeah, it was definitely epic. Pure fan service. It was just a game purely for the fans, which was a nice send off until it wasn't a send off because then they did Metal Gear Solid 5. But
Until
yeah, no,
Konami went into the pachinko business.
I gave up on it and then decided we've butchered this franchise. Not quite enough. We'll release Metal Gear Survive, which was just
Oh God.
horrendous. So, oh dear,
Like
oh dear.
Aliens 3 shall not be mentioned.
Or Colonial Marines.
Well, I'm talking about the movies, but yeah.
Oh yeah, it
So,
was just a butchering of the franchise even further. So
yeah.
I think that's all the news really we want to talk about. So
I think
so
we've
obviously
waffled on
last
long enough
week,
about it.
yeah, yeah, well, it's really important stories or anything like that. So I think definitely worth the time that we spent on them. But one thing that we mentioned last week, which we said we were going to do this week, was that as we're now approaching the PS5 and in the Xbox Series X, the PS4 and the Xbox Ones are now sailing into the sunset. You know, the curtains are closing on those consoles. So we decided we would share our top 5 games of each console. So we'll start off with the PlayStation 4. I thought what might be interesting is that we take it in turns, just to kind of go from number 5 down to number 1 of our most, our favorite exclusive games of the console. And then next week we'll move on to Xbox One.
Mm.
So Dana, what would you say is your 5th favorite game that's exclusive to the PS4?
So I've really struggled with the 5th game on my list. The top 4 I've ironed out and I'm pretty happy with, but the 5th I feel like it would be easier for me to fill this final spot if I sort of finished some of my backlog of games. Like, for example, I've not completely finished the Final Fantasy VII Remake. I've not
Yep.
completely finished God of War. I've not completely finished Detroit Become Human or Ghost of Tsushima, Uncharted Lost Legacy. You know, like there's an embarrassingly long list of amazing PS4 games which I need to finish. But for the purposes of getting this podcast ended in the next sort of century, I would say, and perhaps influenced by recent memory, number 5 will be Ghost of Tsushima.
Right. Okay.
I'd say that. And don't get me wrong, I've not finished Ghost of Tsushima, so I'm sort of, I guess, adding a little bit of an asterisk next to this. I don't know if the story just goes off a cliff at the end and it's horrible and I hate it. Some of the other games that I mentioned that I need to finish could certainly break higher in the top 5 than where they would be. Honourable mentions I'll maybe go through at the end, but
Mhm.
yeah, it's. Yeah, I'd be pretty comfortable for now saying I definitely have a top 4, but the 5th spot has an asterisk, and for the time being, Ghost of Tsushima can go in that
Nice.
spot.
Nice. I can't really add anything to that one because, again, this is one of the games that I've not got around to as well, same as you. You can't get around to everything as soon as release, but yeah, Ghost of Tsushima is definitely one that I saw the look of and really wanted to get around to. So I think that's a respectable one to have in your top 5, definitely.
Yeah.
So my number 5 is a launch game for the PS5, and it's Resogun, which is a game that's made by Housemarque. It was one of the first PS Plus games, I think it was, and it reminds me very similarly of Geometry Wars 2 and things like that, where it's like a score chaser, shooter, sideways shooter, and the idea is it gets tougher and tougher and tougher with the waves. But what a showcase for the system when it came out. It kind of had all the different like a pixelization of like things breaking in the background. The soundtrack was amazing. I remember turning on the subwoofer on the soundbar and having that blasting out, and it was fantastic experience. And the that game feels so good when you're getting your boosters and you've got a perfect score and you're linking it all together and you're chasing the humans that are being kidnapped and things like that. It's just a fantastic game. If you really enjoy those that score chasers and with the epic soundtrack and the really tense gameplay, it's only
Yeah.
available on the PlayStation 4. Actually, no, they ported it to PS3 and PS Vita, but they're nowhere near as good. It loses a lot of its shine actually by being on those platforms. But Yeah, absolutely PS4. It's a if you love those type of arcade games, it's a must play. Did make it to the top 5. It was close. There were other games that I was thinking about having 5, but I feel quite comfortable with that one.
Yeah, I never played it. I remember the name, and I think with it being an arcade game at launch, it's probably not on my radar. But I certainly remember the name of it, and I think like you said, I can remember it being connected to the sort of the PS Plus service when that was
Yeah.
up and running. So
Yeah, and it's Housemarque. Housemarque are just a fantastic development studio that just create great games. So it's the best game they've made. I would say exclusively on the PS4. I know they released games afterwards. I really enjoyed Dead Nation, but that's not included in this top 5 because they released that game on the PS3 first. So I
yeah.
feel it could be included in this list fairly. So.
Very good. Do you want to give me your number 4?
So my number 4 is Horizon Zero Dawn. I am not a massive fan of open world games in that, particularly recent open world games. Maybe it's just an Ubisoft problem or something along those lines. But Far Cry and Assassin's Creed, I just got really burnt out by the idea. You boot up the map and it's just you get a scatter shot of icons all over the screen and they make you do either menial things and the story's not that interesting or in depth with the characters. Horizon changed that for me, actually. Of course, it was made by Guerrilla Games, who were responsible for the Killzone series. So it's quite a different take on theirs. But Aloy as a character, I absolutely loved her. Loved the fact that she had like a complicated past. It had kind of Nordic themes, but with a futuristic slant on them. And the gameplay almost had like a Monster Hunter feel to it, where you're going against these like massive robot dinosaurs and you're having to plan your attack. You need to make sure you've got enough bombs or traps with you to be
Yeah.
able to successfully take it down. And then you kill the creatures, you get the resources, you use it to upgrade your gear. And it's just a really fascinating world. Lovely story track. Looks fantastic on the PlayStation, as a PlayStation 4 as well. I just thought it was really good. I went into the game thinking it would not grab me at all. And I just found I was absolutely hooked and could not put it down. I did all the side quests, all the
Oh wow.
side content, which is unlike me for an open world game. It just hooks me in that much. And the ending was fantastic. So I'm really keen for that, for the sequel for that. But definitely in my top 4, a top 5 PlayStation 4 exclusive games. Have
Interesting.
you managed to get onto Horizon?
I'm playing it on the PC at the moment.
Oh, I.
Um, I'm I'm enjoying it. I think the the although I haven't had the technical problems which I think a lot of people have, I'm sort of holding off on it a little for now because I'm sort of
Yeah,
playing on other games. But um, I can definitely sort of take from what you were saying about the sort of the preparation. It's almost like The Witcher in that you've got to really sort of calculate ahead of time, like exactly what you'll need for certain sort of machines and how to sort of build your character. I'm sort of building Aloy to be more of like a stealthy sort of build, sort of less direct combat, but more kind of taking over machines and sort of sneaking around and attacking from behind
yeah,
and that sort of thing. So, but no, I enjoy it, and I certainly can see why you would sort of place it in the top 5. I think a lot of people would. It's
yeah. No, and I think
carrying a lot of momentum, especially with the sequel now as well on the way.
yeah, it just looks fantastic. I think the reason why it grabbed me so much more than open world games do as well is that it manages to have some really nice environmental storytelling. So there's these uh, play spots that you can get to, and when you get to these spots, you can actually view what it looks like before it all went to this post-apocalyptic view, and so you can kind of glimpse on the what happened, and there's a bit of narrative that goes over that as well. It's one of the collectibles in the game, but it's one of the collectibles that I actually would go out of my way to go and find them all, because it gave you that little bit of insight into how the world became the way it was. So it was really good.
Yeah, interesting.
So what's your number 4?
So number 4 and number 3 were kind of quite hard to place. The difference between the two of them were microscopic in terms of where I placed them. So I just
Right,
want
yeah,
to
it's gonna get
stress that
tough.
it really was tough to kind of place one over the other. And even as I'm saying this, I'm debating on changing 4 and
Oh, the
3.
suspense is killing me, Dan.
Uh,
You're gonna have to tell us what it is.
so at number 4, I'm going to say Last of Us Part 2.
Right, okay.
Um, I know we've talked about Last of Us Part 2 a fair bit between us. I think not necessarily all on podcast, but
Yeah, yeah.
so not to kind of die a death of sort of rehashing that point, but I think the game is generational. I'm not expecting it in your top 5, to be honest, but
No.
no. Um, I, I mean, I loved it. I loved the game. I didn't, for a minute understand the controversy of, the reception of. Um, I think Last of Us is fairly recent, so I don't want to spoil it for anyone that maybe hasn't played it. I know, in fact,
Yeah.
I know 1 or 2 people that are listening definitely haven't played it, so I won't spoil it. But um, yeah, I mean, the reasons for controversy weren't anything to me. I completely bought into the game, the story. I was so immersed. I didn't feel like it went on too long. Felt in some cases I felt it didn't go on long enough. I loved the change of perspective, how you're forced to look at beloved characters differently, which I think is a risky and bold decision in game design. We've talked about Metal Gear Solid. Metal Gear Solid 2, with a lot of people, wasn't a very popular game because you were forced to play as Raiden and not Solid Snake, and
Yeah, yeah.
you were looking at Raiden through the eyes of, or through Solid Snake through the eyes of Raiden to make Solid Snake seem more badass, but your character was a bit of a pansy in comparison. Um, so yeah, there's not much I can say without sort of spoiling it, but I was so bought in. I didn't play any other game when I was playing it. I didn't talk to anyone when I was playing it. I avoided social media like the plague. I just wanted to preserve that playthrough, and I really, really enjoyed it. I just, I don't feel the need for another one. I think a lot of people are calling like, oh, we want Last of Us Part 3, and I completely respect, although no final decisions have been made that I know of. Completely sort of respect Neil Druckmann's kind of sort of direction that he only sort of he will only make a game if he feels that there's a story to be told, and right now he isn't sort of thinking that there's a story that he can tell with The Last of Us. So unofficially, that was the last one, but we'll sort of see what they do, whether or not
Yeah.
there's a sort of a kind of a left behind equivalent with part 2. Maybe there's definitely some stories that they can tell.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'd be pretty comfortable putting it at 4. I don't know if you thought I might put that higher. Um,
I think it's hard. I think exactly as you said, there've been so many games that have come out which have just been like, fantastic. The closer you get to number one, the harder it is always going to be set to
yeah,
rank one above the other. I think, having The Last of Us Part 2 in the top 5 is going to be in a lot of top 5 people's top 5 lists. For me, we spoke about it before, but for me, it didn't quite hit the highs of the first one, just because I think the reason why I love the first one so much was the relationship between the two characters that you played as. And I don't think the other one, the sequel, had that depth. But I would definitely recommend people play it, particularly if they've played the first one, or it's a great series to play. And visually as well, it is hands down the best looking game on PS4. Visually it looked fantastic. They put a lot of effort into the sound design of the game as well. It's just like Last of Us, the original Last of Us was for the PS3, in being like a real push of the system to deliver the best possible visual experience
yeah,
possible on that console. This game's done exactly the same for the PS4 as well.
yeah. And yourself, number 4?
So we're
you gave number 4, so it's number 3 now, isn't it?
Here's number 3. So this one might be a controversial one as well. It's going to be Uncharted Lost Legacy. I say might be controversial because it's not the mainline series. It's a spin-off. So I played Uncharted 4 and I played Uncharted Lost Legacy, but I do prefer Lost Legacy over Uncharted 4. And for me, the Uncharted Lost Legacy starts off very good, and then it becomes, and then there's a small open world bit that really put me off the game at first. Like I was not enjoying it for that part. But then it goes back to being a classic Uncharted game. And I say classic, it's a classic one like Uncharted 1, 2, 3, and Golden Abyss. Uncharted 4 became like a game that was half Uncharted, half The Last of Us. And I think that was a good story, a good game in terms of the storytelling. And you got to know a bit more about Nathan Drake and his past. And it was like a good swan song for Nathan Drake story. But Uncharted Lost Legacy was tighter. It was a more enjoyable experience. It made me laugh a lot more. And I think it was just a great game. It's a very, it is, in my mind, one of the best Uncharted games that are there. So highly recommend playing it. I don't think they marketed it very well when it came out. It made it seem like it was a DLC rather than being its own thing, which
Yeah.
I probably why a lot of people haven't played it. But yeah, it's fantastic, particularly if you preferred the older versions of Uncharted 1, 2, 3, where Amy Henning was on board.
Yeah.
I think you'd enjoy Uncharted Lost Legacy. And it's quite
Interesting.
short as well. It's about between 15 and 20 hours to get through, and you can replay it if you want to do harder difficulties or
Yeah.
you want to get the collectibles and things like that. But it's not going to be a massive time sink, so which is also appealing as well.
Yeah. And I mean, it was also, I think when it came out, it was only a £30 game, wasn't it? It was quite it was priced as like an expansion, wasn't
Yeah,
it? Am I
exactly.
mistaken?
Yeah,
Yeah.
it
Yeah,
was
it's
like
quite
almost
cheap.
like almost like a budget price game, but
Yeah.
in terms of the experience, it's definitely not budget. I think it uses the same
Well, it was
game engine as Uncharted
originally
4.
originally developed as an expansion for Uncharted 4, and then when they realized how powerful the chemistry with the characters were, and again, the story they could tell with it, I think it kind of grew out of being an expansion into its own thing just because of how good it was, so it's
No, definitely. And
yeah.
it's the only Uncharted game that follows on directly from the events of Uncharted 4. So if you want to kind of see what happens to any of the characters, you'll be able to see that by playing that game. So it's well worth playing. So
Interesting.
yeah, that's my number 3. What about yours?
So at number 3, I'm going to go with Death Stranding.
That doesn't surprise me at all. I know how much you love that game.
Yeah. Again, it was sort of one of those where it was almost microscopic between 3, 2, and 1, arguably. It was, it certainly could have been placed higher. As just not enough good things I can say about it, really. It was, it's one of those games where I didn't buy it at launch. I sort of had it, I think I got it about 5 or 6 months after it came out. Before I bought it and I was stood in the store, I had Death Stranding and Days Gone in my hand, and it was a bit of a sort of a flip as to which one I would actually buy and take home. Didn't want to buy both of them because they're both sort of open world, but no, I went with Death Stranding and certainly couldn't be happier. It was just it's a journey. It was just a really sort of it's just pure escapism. I can't put it any better. I mean, it really felt like, I mean, there's sort of within the game. I mean, it's kind of almost its own genre in that it's sort of kind of a part of this Strand genre, which sort of I think there's a few games that maybe belong to it, like as odd as it might be to say, the sort of the Snow Runner sort of truck driving simulating game that's I don't know what it's called. I think it's called SnowRunner or something like that. It's one of those sort of hardcore driving games, but it's a
Yeah.
world that's shared by other players, and you sort of cooperatively play with players, but without actually playing with them. So you build structures in certain places, and it doesn't just appear in your world, but it appears in other people's worlds. And Death Stranding was very much sort of a part of that genre, if not the pioneer of it. I've not really done any sort of research which came first, but it's just there isn't anything like it. It's so hard to explain. And if you try and sell it to somebody, if you sort of explain what it is and you try and sell it to them, it doesn't, it's not an easy game to sell.
No.
It's like, what's the gameplay? Well, you deliver packages from one place to another. What's the story? Well, you're kind of reconnecting these sort of isolated pockets of sort of settlers that are spread out across the United States of America, and you've got to connect them by bringing them onto what's called the chiral network, which is this sort of kind of like the internet in a way. It allows people to communicate with each other and share research and ways of survival and things like that. But your sort of role is just taking packages from one place to another. That's it.
Yeah, the ultimate walking simulator.
And Hideo Kojima called it a walking simulator. He said that's what it is.
Yeah.
So it was hard to explain. It's a really hard game, I think, to pitch, but it grabbed me in a way that very few games have, and especially at a time when COVID was kicking off, and the country was going into lockdown, the world was going into lockdown, and I sort of found this game, and it was just, I mean, it's got I could probably waffle on and not really make any clear points because I'm so kind of lost in the game, but some of the things that really stand out to me that I can articulate without boring people is that it has a really amazing cast of voice actors. You've got Troy Baker, who is the main kind of protagonist. You've got, can you still hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Yeah. So you've got Troy Baker, which is kind of like the main protagonist. You've got Norman Reedus, who is the main character. That's who you play as. You've got Guillermo del Toro, which is quite a famous film director, responsible for quite a lot of big films. I think he did like Pan's Labyrinth and quite a lot of Latin American movies. You've got, I think his name's Tommy Jarvis. I didn't know about him before. Right. I might be wrong. I feel really bad if completely. It's not Tommy Jarvis. It's not. That's Friday the 13th. What am I on about? Tommy something. But he's a really, really good actor. He plays a character called Die Hardman in the game. Right. And a few other voice actors which I hadn't ever heard of, a few cameos in the game, which I completely didn't expect. But it was just, it's just amazing. I couldn't recommend it enough. And when I say that, I only recommend it to certain people, and the people that I have recommended it to, and they've gone through and played it, have absolutely loved it, So
nice.
Yeah, so I've probably waffled on a bit too much there, but it's a game that I sort of feel really strongly about, and the soundtrack as well is absolutely incredible. The score for the game is incredible, but the sort of the bands that feature on it quite heavily are a band called Low Roar. I'd never heard of them before. I think they're absolutely amazing, well worth checking out. The band, I think, are sort of Icelandic American or something. I think it's sort of a mixture of nationalities, but I know Hideo Kojima discovered them when he was on holiday in Iceland, or he was visiting Iceland, and he came across this band. And once he sort of found this band, he was like, I've got to put them in a game. I'm going to put them in a game. Like it has to happen, and they fit so well. It really is. It's so good. So
Nice.
yeah, sorry about that. It's not probably not made much sense. It probably wasn't very fun to listen to, but I absolutely love Death Stranding. It's such a good game, and I bought it again on the
No.
PC. So
Double dip.
absolutely.
Good, good, good. What would you say your number twos then?
Number 2 is Uncharted 4.
Nice. Okay, so very similar to my number 3.
Yeah. I think I can spoil Uncharted 4. I think that's okay, isn't it? That's been out. It's
Well,
been
if
out.
not, take that as a
Yeah.
take this as a warning that
If you
if
don't
you
want
listen now, it is going to spoil it.
if you don't want Uncharted 4 spoiling, fast forward probably 2.5 minutes and then come back. But yeah, I'd say Uncharted 4. The ending of the game especially was very powerful. That sort of transition of generations. Going from Nathan Drake to his daughter. That I thought that sort of final level, was so perfectly put together. I loved the adventure, throughout the game.
Yeah.
Uncharted have always been very good at that, and the sort of the flashbacks to when Nathan Drake was a child in an orphanage and his relationship with his brother, which I think is Troy Baker, if I'm not mistaken. I think he was the voice of his
Yeah.
brother.
Yeah. He plays
So,
his brother's voice. Yeah.
so it's and Nolan North, you can't beat it. He's a classic, isn't he? He's a class act, I should say, voice
Yeah.
actor. So yeah, that'd be my 2, Uncharted 4.
No, that's good. I
Yeah,
think that game finishes perfectly as well. What a perfect ending for that game and for Nathan Drake's story, and clearly how they're going to be. They're clearly ending the story of Nathan Drake in a really nice and respectful way, and they're now going to be exploring. The hint is that his daughter will pick up that mantle and
yeah,
carry on the Uncharted franchise, which would be great to see. I'd love to see that.
yeah, yeah. It's yeah. I mean, I agree. I would love a transition of what is it like, the sort of the passing of the mantle, if that's the right phrase. He's sort of going
Yeah.
from Nathan Drake to his daughter. I think it would be amazing. But yeah,
Yeah, and how she finds out at the end was quite good. So
yeah,
I think I really like Uncharted 4 simply because they actually go ahead and acknowledge the Vita game that came out, Golden Abyss, even though they didn't make the game. They obviously it was made by Blend, a Ben Studio, which made Siphon Filter and Days Gone. So they, made Golden Abyss and they actually still acknowledged it in the game. And the reason why I think that's quite neat is because if you look at places like WB, Warner Brothers, they acknowledge the Arkham trilogy, but Arkham Origins, which was made by Warner Brothers Montreal, I think it was, just completely gets snubbed with every single re-release. They almost like ignore that it ever existed, which is always I always found a bit almost like a bit disrespectful, really. So it was quite nice to see that in Uncharted 4 as a PS Vita fan who really enjoyed that game. So.
yeah. No, I mean, I played that game by your recommendation, and thoroughly enjoyed it. It was a fantastic handheld Uncharted experience, which you wouldn't expect given how sort of big those productions are and how immersive those games are, but it really worked.
Yeah, no, good. No, I really enjoyed that.
How about you? What's
So
your number
number 2
2?
for me is Spider-Man.
Wow.
So this was really hard between number 2 and number 1, but in the end, it had to be. I had to pick Spider-Man as number 2. What a game! I just the story. I didn't expect that the Spider-Man story would be so good in terms of actually keeping me engaged and hooked throughout, and a fantastic story from start to finish. The beginning of the game highlights the troubles that Peter Parker has balancing the being a superhero for free and then balancing that with things like paying rent. It was just such a a nice insight into the character. the guy who voices Peter Parker is fantastic. If you're a Persona 4 fan, you've probably realised that the same guy it's the same guy who plays Yosuke from
Yes,
Persona
yeah,
4 Golden.
yeah, yeah,
And he plays the character so well. It does do some things on the nose, like spoiler alert, very early on. I don't think anyone was assuming that Doctor Octopus was not going to be the villain in it, because it kind of hammers that home straight on. But really good game, really fun. Open world was really good. Bit repetitive towards the end, and the DLC that was added at the end of it, whilst it was fun to play and gave you more Spider-Man, some of it dragged on a little bit and didn't really add much to the story, even though it was after the events of Spider-Man 4 ending. But yeah, definitely one of the best looking games on there. And it was generally fun to play. There was times where I just literally booted the game up and just swung around the city, for 10 minutes at a 20 minutes at the
yeah,
time. They had a fast travel system that I never used, because I didn't want to use it, because it was just fun as oak, just picking up that momentum and speed and flying across town. So
yeah, yeah. No, I agree. Yeah, and I think the fast travel as well, like it was done in a way that was quite funny, with the kind of underground cutscenes. Sort of like Spider-Man like sat on a tram or like hanging upside down, and
yeah,
fellow sort of New York citizens sat there. I understand why you wouldn't have used that as much. Yeah, it's definitely a lot more fun, slinging the web round and swinging through the city. But the few times that I did use the fast travel, it was always really quirky and well done. So
yeah,
quite,
yeah. And like the traversal and the city was great. The combat was fun. It was like a nice improvement on the Arkham formula, and the the soundtrack was fantastic as well. It was unbelievable. Like, I love the fact that as soon as you jump off a building, the soundtrack just kind of appears out of nowhere, and you got this epic, music playing in the background whilst you're swinging from location to location. And as a Marvel fan as well, being able to see all the Easter eggs around the city as well, like, oh look, there's Doctor Strange's location. Oh look, there's a reference to
yeah,
Jessica Jones and Daredevil.
yeah,
It was just a proper you know a a a Marvel property, done right, and done
yeah,
well, and it made people look at that that game series and basically think, wow, we have another equivalent of Rocksteady's Dark Knight series now on console, on a different console generation.
yeah. Interesting. And
So are
what's
we
your
now
number
at your
one?
number two or number one? Oh well,
Well, I
well, mine.
my
Sorry.
my number two is Uncharted 4. So
Oh, of course it was.
yeah,
Yes, of course it was. I'm losing track of the numbers now.
last one.
So the last one, we're almost there. So my last one was God of War.
God,
It
okay.
is absolutely my favorite exclusive game on PlayStation 4. Way more than I thought it would be. I've played God of War before, the old ones. I played the PSP versions and really enjoyed those. They were just a bit of dumb fun, and you button mashy, very gory, very adult themed in terms of what you saw, but ultimately they're just button mashy dumb fun. So what was interesting is when this game started, I was very much like, well, this doesn't play anything like it, like the
Mm,
other God of War games. It had the Nordic setting, it had an amazing soundtrack, and it's a very somber story. The game open, the game starts with you basically um, gathering wood
the mother.
to
Yeah,
bury his wife,
yeah,
and
or
then
the wife. Yeah,
to cremate his wife, yeah, and that's how the game starts, and they're fulfilling them his wife's last wish, which is to go to Jotunheim, and that is the
yeah,
story basically. You're fulfilling this last wish, but it handles it so well. The relationship between Atreus and Kratos is just fantastic. It very much brought back memories of the story of Joel and Ellie from the first Last of Us game,
yeah,
and the combat was great. The axe, how kinetic it felt when you threw the axe and it ripped through enemies, and you'd summon it back and it'd rip back through again. And it was also difficult in parts. The characters you meet were really interesting, and it's just there's some real, I'm not going to spoil this game at all because I think it's just one of those games
I
that
haven't
people
finished
haven't
it, yeah.
played.
So
It's
yeah,
well worth going and visit, but there were certain twists in that game store which literally made my jaw drop, and the ending was just phenomenal. Really,
right.
really strong ending to the game. Um, it's just a must play. It's just the
Okay.
best game on PS4 in my view, and well worth playing. If you haven't played it or you haven't finished it, I definitely think. Well, the sequel's now coming out next year, so
Yes, yeah, Ragnarok, yeah.
definitely get around to finishing it. So,
And it's a PS5 exclusive.
definitely, yeah, PS5, God of War 2. So definitely
That
looking forward
will
to
be a
that.
PS5 exclusive. I don't think
Yeah,
that'll be on the PC anytime soon, but yeah.
no, no. Other rumors have that God of War is the next PlayStation game to make the way to PC after
Yeah,
Horizon.
well,
So
that's what I mean. Like, I think if they're not sort of locked down, I think they're sort of timed for a long time. I think certain games, whilst they might be on the PC eventually, I think you could very well see them on the on the PS5 for a fair while before they
yeah, 3 to 4
transition
years
over.
after.
Yeah.
Yeah, so drum roll then. Your number one is definitely not God of War because you've not finished it or played
Not
much of it, I
finished
don't
it,
imagine.
and that again sort of falls into that kind of like asterisk. Like that might be the number one when I do get around to finishing it. So, my
What's your
number one
number
is
one then?
Spider-Man.
Nice, nice. I
Spider-Man,
thought it might be.
Spider-Man PS4. Yeah. Um, Obviously, you sort of hit a lot of points with your sort of number two pick being the same game, but yeah, I sort of think it was it was one of those games where, I mean, like most of the games in my top five, I couldn't put it down.
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah,
I really felt like I was Spider-Man. The attention to detail, how if he's on the phone while you're swinging, his voice will be more sort of labored and tired because he's sort of obviously swinging from building to building and he's
yeah,
using energy. But then when you stop, his voice goes back to normal and he catches his breath. That's so subtle, but it just adds a level of immersion, which is just so appreciated.
yeah,
Um, the combination of abilities, it wasn't particularly difficult to platinum. I think it's the most platinumed PlayStation game of all time, or at least it was when it came out. Um,
right.
it is just I honestly I can't find a fault with it. The main story was amazing. I was so bought into Aunt May and the story of Peter Parker, and is it Uncle Ben? Is that his Uncle Benji? Uncle Ben? It's the sort of the dude, the main sort of uncle guy in his life.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Obviously, the ending of the game was very poignant. I thought it was very well done.
Mhm.
Um, yeah, it's special. I think it's
Yeah,
probably
I
yeah,
think I completely agree with that, and I think the one thing that I didn't mention, which is, you know, a real nice addition to that game, very early on, and a slight spoiler, but it's not related to the story, but you got to see that Stanley cameo at the beginning of the game,
yes,
and then
yeah,
they kind of, as a credits roll as well, you kind of see that being re-mentioned because, of course, Stanley passed away during the creation of that game before it came
yeah,
out. So, it's really almost like, nice to see him in the game, voiced by Stanley, and then a perfect swan, send off for him at the end. So,
yeah.
really special that. So,
And I still I still play it now. I mean, I'm working my way through the DLC. I've done the first one, and then I'm on to the second one now. And
yeah,
the the feeling of you know exploring New York City, and there's been times where I haven't even been using the webs. I've just been walking down the street.
oh
Like
yeah,
walking from like Lower Manhattan to Central Park, just sort of getting a feeling for, I mean, I've been to New York City and obviously I've not been all around it, but you can sort of really get that feeling, in the game, and I think that's a sort of a testament to just how well made that game is. I mean, you had people, who live in New York City literally going to like their apartment and taking pictures from like the top of their building and then matching it up with an actual photo that they've
Yeah, I
taken
saw
from the.
those. Yeah,
Do you know what I mean? So it's not even like a sort of a copy paste sort of procedurally generated New York. That they have taken time to make it mostly accurate. And I'm sure there's people that'll be a lot more familiar with New York that will point out differences and exceptions that have been made. But I think for the most part, it certainly holds up. And like you said, all the Easter eggs, like going to the Avengers building,
yeah,
super cool. And the transition, to Miles Morales, I think is fantastic. Can't wait for that game.
yeah,
I'd say aside from Harry Potter, that's definitely, well, I shouldn't say Harry Potter, it's called Hogwarts Legacy. But aside from that, it's my most anticipated game for the PlayStation 5. So yeah, I'd be pretty confident putting that number one. I don't
nice.
think that would change regardless of what other backlog I get through, but I'll be open to adjustments.
Yeah, no, definitely. I think it's worth highlighting just some of the games that we haven't got. Well, obviously, we mentioned some of the games that we haven't been able to get around to. Um, for you mentioned that you hadn't got around to God of War fully, but is there any other games that you consider you need to get cleared on your backlog that were quite well
Yeah,
received?
yeah. I need to finish Lost Legacy because I mean, like you say, like you said, I've sort of got to the open world section and lost interest. Um, Definitely need to finish that. The other one was Detroit Become Human. I've kind
Oh
of
yeah,
started and kind of got a little bit bored of it, but um, I definitely want to go back and finish that. It's on PC as well, so I could always do it on there, but we'll
hmm
see. Obviously, God of War is the main one,
yeah,
100%. I got Days Gone on the PS4 sales for $9.99, and it's got incredible reviews and people really rave about it. But I've played probably about 6 or 7 hours, and I'm struggling. I
yeah,
am struggling. It's so dry, and it's like the first sort of 15 seconds of the game, I was like, okay, like I can see where this is going. And then like when you kind of start playing, I was like, okay, well that was nothing, or it
yeah.
felt like nothing. So I don't want to sort of belittle it too much because it could certainly be a very special game, but it is on the list. Whether if I get to it before the PS5, unlikely, but it's one that I want to play. So,
Nice.
but yeah, I
No,
think
that's good.
there's probably one or two others that I'm not mentioning, but those are the main ones. God of War, Lost Legacy, Days Gone, Detroit Become Human. I
They're the
think
ones that
that's it.
stick out to you.
I think so, yeah.
Yeah. And I think there's a few that I'm in the same boat with as well. I haven't played Final Fantasy VII Remake, but that's one I really want to get round to.
Yeah.
I want to give Bloodborne a fair whack and give that a good go. Neo as well, the same. I want to give that a good go. And also Days Gone. I've not played that yet, but I do want to play that. And now at this stage, I haven't got the game, but I might wait until it comes out. Well, when I get PS5, because that PlayStation Plus collection is included in there. So I might have some new bell and whistles on there. And the last one that I've got and I own, and I've got the collector's edition of, but I haven't touched it yet, is Persona 5 Royal.
Right.
So
Yeah.
I've got Persona 5 Royal sat here, the Phantom Thieves edition of the game, and I still haven't touched it. And that is, if you look at Metacritic and what people say about it, it's meant to be one of the best PlayStation 4 exclusives. So there might be people screaming into their device that they're listening to this podcast on because we haven't mentioned it, but it is certainly one that I do want to get around to.
Yeah.
But the reason why I haven't mentioned it in my top 5 is because I haven't played it, and it'd be a bit disingenuous to include it when I haven't.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's
So
what I say, like with the fifth slot being sort of Ghost of Tsushima, I only put that
yeah,
there because you want it top 5, and I've played more of that than I have of the other backlog. Um, but yeah, interesting to hear. It, I honestly, I'm surprised you had as many kind of more mainstream games in your list as you did. Uh,
yeah,
I
well,
I sort of anticipated quite a quirky kind of like a what, like
yeah,
like no Uncharted or no Spiderman or like,
yeah,
but very very conventional picks aside from the red,
yeah.
which I wasn't. surprised about. But
I mean, the thing is, I think it's because we're picking exclusives. There are
I
games that
thought
I
so.
really love. Like, it's no secret that one of my favorite games of all in the past 10 years has been Hollow Knight. I've just
Yeah,
been
yeah,
enamored with that game. But that game, you could play it on PS4, Xbox One, Switch, PC. It's going to rate you, but so for example, I wouldn't feel like it could be included in this list. But if we do a top 10, top 10 favorite games, it's definitely, spoiler alert, it's going to be in that list. Although it won't be number one. So if we do that list, there's still going to be something for people you lot to listen to.
Hmm.
We have we have had one query from someone who has shared their top 3 games, so in no particular order. So Rob_Sweetson reached out to us on Twitter with 3 of his favorite games
All right.
for the PS4 exclusive list. So for him, he's put Final Fantasy 7, and he basically said that it's a masterpiece of game mechanics. The controls, the music, the characters, the voice acting, and most of all the story was just unbelievable.
Yep.
Spiderman, he said it was in the top 3 Spider-Man games of all time. So I'd be quite keen to hear what the other 2 Spider-Man games were.
Yeah, yeah.
If they rate higher than that's in this PS4 Spider-Man. And another one, which his last favorite game, which I've not played myself actually, was Amplitude, which was the
Harmonic, is it?
yeah, they remade it for PS4, and for him, it brings back memories of the original title. It was the foundation of what became Guitar Hero and Rock Band, so it
Yeah,
was nice to dip back to that band, that game. So
yeah.
interesting. I haven't heard much about Amplitude, but I've definitely seen it. I've played the demo of it. I can see why there's that hook there. So, a nice oddball to throw in the end of the show there.
Yeah, interesting. Well, we've got what we're doing the Xbox One next week.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, so we'll share our top 5 exclusive Xbox One games next week. I think it might be a bit easier than PlayStation, although we might be surprised by some of the ones that come out of them. Yeah, well, maybe this could be controversial. Maybe
We'll see. I might
We'll
just
see.
see these 5 times.
And of course, for you lot listening, you can get involved in that conversation as well. We'd love to hear what are your favorite Xbox One exclusive games, and just reach out to either me or Dan on Twitter. Again, you can reach out to Dan on Twitter, which is TatchND, TatchND, and me, it's at Matroidvania. So you can reach out with your questions, your thoughts, your top Xbox exclusive games. We'd love to hear from you. So, right, that's been quite a bumper show.
Yeah.
I've managed to keep it together. I'm slowly moving into deliriousness now
Yeah.
because I'm hungry, and also I think this cold cough, definitely not coronavirus, is starting to kick my backside a little bit. So I think we'll call it there. You got anything you want to add?
No, I think it's a good, like I say, a good time to end. I think I need to get on with some cooking, get some food, get some substance, and yeah.
Oh, sounds good.
Catch you
Sounds
next
good.
week.
Yeah, thanks for listening, everyone, and we'll catch you next week.
Bye.